Hi, everyone. This is Hawken Miller. Thanks so much for tuning in to Two Disabled Dudes. You can hear more of my story in episode 109. But in the meantime, check out this new episode from the podcast here.
Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Hey everybody, it's Kyle and Sean, the Two Disabled Dudes. We are coming to you from a bedroom in Sacramento, California, in a storage closet in Exton, Pennsylvania. Sean, we've been talking about these one things. What's up with that?
Well, the one thing, for me, it's been helpful, right? I'm getting things done that I've always wanted to do, but I wouldn't do because I talk myself out of them. Because there's no accountability, right? So it's been nice to have the accountability. The problem that we're running into, Kyle, as a lot of people know, we sometimes record interviews ahead of time and we think ahead through our one thing. So unfortunately today, I can't give you a report of my one thing because we're having a conversation multiple times today. So I don't have a one thing to check in on. So I think, to be fair to our listeners, we want you to know that although we're not going to be able to give you a report every single week, we will give an account to all of our one things, most likely in these episodes where it's just Kyle and I. We're just, we'll check in on it later.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think our friendship is a lot about accountability, right?
Totally.
And so this is going to be good. All right. So last week in episode 117, we spoke to Team Gleason and we talked a little bit about Project Euphonia. Well, this week we're doing a deep dive with one of the guys that's working on that project at Google. His name is Bob MacDonald. And we're excited to bring you the conversation with Bob. So here it is.
All right, this is another one we've been looking forward to for some time, but actually also really cool because I think we threw the idea of recording out a couple weeks ago, and Bob said, yeah, let's do it this week. So we've been excited to welcome Bob from Google, representing Project Euphonia. Bob, can you hear us all right?
Coming in loud and clear, Sean.
Bob, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Really happy to be here. You guys are amazing.
Thank you. Can you give us a little bit of who you are, why you're on the show today, what brought you to Google? Give us a glimpse, or our listeners a glimpse, of who you are.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. My involvement in Project Euphonia started about 2 years ago. And I was working at the time on projects related to using machine learning on medical images. So images like chest x-rays, retinal images, and most specifically for me, pathology images. We were developing techniques that could develop tools for detecting cancer or cancer-related features that would help in the diagnosis and treatment of people who need pathology workups. One of the directors at Google, who is the executive sponsor for Project Euphonia, Phil Nelson, tapped me on the shoulder just kind of in passing and said, hey, I've got a small effort going where we're looking to apply machine learning to recordings, to acoustic data. We're focused right now on people with ALS and trying to figure out if we can adapt our speech recognizers to better understand their voices as they change through the progression of the disease. And that really hit a personal chord because my sister, her first husband, had been diagnosed with ALS. back in the 1990s. And, he went through the full progression and passed away a number of years later. And I just knew inherently how incredibly powerful it would be for a technology that could help someone with ALS communicate with their loved ones and caregivers further, into the progression. That was one of the most heart-wrenching parts of the disease, was the struggle to communicate both directions. So that was the way that I got involved. And I've been working, hard to help us get enough data and work with enough partners to actually make this work. So anyway, that was kind of my road into Project Euphonia.
I think one thing I love about that part of that piece of your story, of course, heartbreaking to hear about your own personal and family connection to ALS. But I think that story helps us realize that no matter how big or valuable or important somebody or something is, we all have hardships, right? And I love what we're doing here today in this collaboration where you're representing Google today, or a project of Google, and then you've got a couple disabled dudes just hanging out on the phone with you. And really what we're doing is that we're just bringing as many different players to the table to make something better and more feasible, like you said, for people with disabilities, whether it's ALS or something else, to be able to communicate with their loved ones or their caregivers, which is such a vital part to our quality of life.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. And the really interesting thing to me is as we've gotten deeper into this, and we have expanded the scope. Our goal is to improve speech recognizers for a wide variety of speech patterns that aren't currently understood, and transcribed accurately enough. Just how profound, speech communication is to sort of our own, connections with the people around us, the definitions and kind of identification. And so, to the extent that technology can help facilitate that, there's it's just, immensely gratifying to imagine that someday the results of this research that we're doing right now could impact people in such a kind of fundamental way. And it requires this deep collaboration. It's not something that could be done, in, kind of the, corporate walls of, of just one company. This really is going to require, a large kind of interconnected effort to make it work.
So I want to just to make the picture very clear for listeners, what we're talking about today with Project Euphonia is your team's work to make machine learning, or it possible for people with speech impediments to be understood by a Alexa or Siri or something of that nature. Is that right? Just kind of layman's basic terms.
That's right. The first step of that is that some device that someone has, a phone, a tablet, a computer, a home automation system, is being exposed to this the sound that someone is producing, and then a whole bunch of stuff happens behind that can facilitate communication either with the device or with another human through things like transcripts, real-time transcripts, or an ability if someone's sending an email or a text message or something, being able to more accurately kind of convert that speech to text, or to re-utter the text as speech in sort of a more canonical sound, so that someone whose ear isn't adapted well to understand that individual's style of speech, they can understand it more easily.
That's really powerful. I think it's something we don't really think about. I think we talk to our phones, hey, what's the temperature outside or whatever it is,
Yeah,
without even thinking about how much it takes behind the scenes, after we speak. I mean, what, holy cow, machines have learned to understand that. That's a pretty neat thing. The machine learning is based on, if there is the normal speech patterns of a human being, right? And so
yeah,
if somebody outside of that, like, you don't really think about, oh, they can't even do this thing, that we don't think about that much.
that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. And these voice activated features or products are becoming more and more widespread, capable of doing more things, adding convenience to people's lives, being taken for granted by more and more people, except the people where it doesn't work. And in those cases, whether it is a neurological disease or something else that makes the way they sound different enough from what has been used to train these computers, then it can be immensely frustrating. And so, an interesting aspect of that is, we call it machine learning, and indeed, the machines have been taught, they've learned how to recognize what someone is saying as like words and sentences. Um, and they apply no judgment to what's typical or atypical. All they know is what they've been exposed to. So to them, typical just means the patterns that they've seen in this finite number of examples that have been given to them. And that's sort of a segue to the technical description of machine learning. Usually people describe as a specific approach to programming these computers to do a task like speech recognition or image recognition, where you give it a lot of examples. So this approach is not a new idea, but with the power of new computers, it's really what's revolutionized a lot of these things. It's really example-based learning, which is very similar to how humans learn most things that we know, like language and speaking. We learn as toddlers and infants just by example after example. Later on, someone goes and tells us grammar and the rules of language, but most fluent speakers learned the rules after they already knew the rules inherently just from a lot of examples. And that's really how machine learning today works, is by collecting enough of these examples that the computer can learn, in a manner that turns out to be quite similar to what has proven effective for humans to learn.
And I think it's perfect because it sounds like that's where Project Euphonia comes in, right? You talk about all these different examples or samples that the machines are being fed, and that's really what you guys are working on right now, is trying to get all those samples. I'm sure there's a whole lot more on the back end in terms of listening and working through those samples. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly what Project Euphonia is and what you're doing with those samples?
Absolutely. So, I alluded to the vision behind Project Euphonia before, to make progress on commercially available speech recognition technology and broaden the effectiveness to more and more people. So what it is, say, coming from a different angle, it's currently in a research phase, and I say that not because our ambition is strictly academic. Really, the motivation for myself and all of my colleagues working on this is to see that products come out, products are improved in these directions. But because we don't yet know how much data we need, how long it's going to take to retrain, we don't want people to expect a specific timeline, because that's really hard to predict. And one thing that we do know is that it's more strongly tied to the number of examples, the amount of data that we can expose our system to, than anything else. So that's part of the research is, hey, how do we get enough people whose voices aren't understood well to be heard by our system, to submit their voice samples. So what we're doing really at the core, one key piece is reaching out to partners, organizations, individuals who believe that their pattern of speech isn't well understood and ought to be, and collecting data from them. They share data with us. Contributors can request that we share back to them all of the recordings for some other use that they might have. But then our researchers, our kind of machine learning, computer science experts, take that increasing body of diverse speech and we adapt our standard speech recognizers to work better. These standard speech recognizers represent the work of a huge team over many years compiling speech from many populations. But of course, those populations have a comparatively small fraction and maybe even very artificially smaller fraction of speech that's kind of beyond the kind of normal patterns, just because kind of statistically that's the way a random sampling shows up. And so then we have that research on different ways that we can attempt to retrain our speech recognizer based on a much smaller pool of data from these cohorts. People with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, people who've suffered a stroke or had traumatic brain injury that affected their speech, or ALS, or there's a number of conditions. And what's most important to us is these are people who can kind of utter words, but just the acoustics of it sound too different. And then the final component of this is working closely with a small number of people in an increasing number of these kind of population segments to test out these kind of adapted models that are still very raw and researchy, and see how well it works, and see how someone would use that technology beyond just the kind of the conventional voice-activated actions that we have today.
So, couple thoughts. When you were talking about the number of atypical samples is small, that's
Right.
because I think a big part of it is when people aren't understood and they have to keep repeating themselves and find ways to communicate, that makes them communicate less.
Absolutely.
It's frustrating, right?
Yeah.
So it's a vicious cycle. Like, I can't speak well, and I won't speak as much.
Yeah, 100%. And we're trying to turn that on its head. We see a key to success is kind of getting into a virtuous cycle where we're able to deliver something that's useful to a reasonably large number of people, even if it's not everyone on day one, because there's a spectrum of speech impairments, and it's a complex space. But if we can if we can get something useful in enough people's hands that they want to use their voice and they want to share those examples, then our system gets better, gets more useful to people who sound similar to them. Those people get motivated to share their voice. And then we really, again, we kind of get that process working in a positive direction.
Man, it gives me chills because there's people that don't value their voice and they devalue themselves as a whole because of it. And what you're saying is, no, we need you more than other people. Like, you are
Right.
super valuable. And I think that's an amazing thing about this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I referred to this requiring this sort of connected effort. Machine learning, this examples-based process, the examples come from the population, from people who aren't understood well. So they are absolutely part and parcel to making this work. So we need them. They're as essential as kind of food or oxygen to the program as are like the people with advanced degrees and
Right.
can turn the knobs of computer science. Without the data, without these examples, there's a real cap on how good we can make the technology.
I love that comes up because that's really how we all got connected, is in this effort to partner with other organizations and individuals whose communities are affected by speech impediments or dysarthria, or whatever things might be hindering the ability for most to understand each other or somebody else. So that's what we're hoping for today, is we actually encourage some of our listeners, especially those who are hard to understand sometimes, like me and Kyle, to get involved and to sit down in front of a computer or the phone or whatever. And like you said, just record themselves giving these pre-recorded statements and messages in order to help feed the data, or feed the research. And I love how simplistic that seems, because, when I think of medical research for the sake of a treatment or cures for some of these diseases like ours, there, I don't have billions of dollars sitting around to go pay for this, that, or the other. But my contribution is that I can give you my arm and you can draw blood, and let's see what data that comes up with. And I can take some pills and see how my body reacts, or all these different things. So just being able to be a part of the process in the aspect of just feeding data is valuable, whether it turns out to be a treatment or a cure, or whether in this case it actually works in 6 months or in 2 years or whatever it may be. It's all helpful. Data, I believe data is helpful, whether it's good data or bad data. Like, to me, there is no such thing, right? Data is important, and you've got to have it all. And I love that you guys are giving people from all walks of life and all levels of speech to be able to participate, ultimately with the hope that y'all are able to, like I said, turn it on its head and provide products that make speech easier for people in their own lives. That's huge.
That's really our goal. And this data really is key, and it doesn't require any one individual to understand like what's going on behind the scenes. In the same way that when there's a newborn, we instinctively know as parents, or people, adults around, living around young children, that the more we talk to them, the more quickly they'll learn how to speak and how to understand. We also inherently understand that we kind of start with simpler words, simpler sentences, and then over time we expand. And ironically, it's very much true with computers also. So, even once we've say made the system better able to understand a wider range of speech patterns, it won't have an unlimited vocabulary. So it won't be as accurate in transcribing all manner of subjects that people want to talk about, or all bands, or or artists of one type or another. It will learn that over time. But if we can kind of get the basics and get it sort of fluent at like primary grade speech understanding, again, we think then more people will be talking to it. They'll gradually expand the examples and the domain. So none of us needed to understand what's going on in the human brain. We still don't understand how the neurons connect, but that doesn't prevent us from being incredibly effective teachers of speech to humans that are learning that for the first time. Same way here. No one needs to understand deep neural networks or any of those kind of things going on. We just need to know that the more we talk to this system, the better it will become over time. And that really is the call to action. So,
Sure.
Anyone that knows people who might be interested, we really encourage you to, show us how you sound.
You say no one's got to understand neuroscience. Even Sean was able to do this, and he doesn't understand much at all, much less neuroscience, So,
I can read simple sentences out loud all day. I love that you put it that way, Bob. The call to action here really is to encourage listeners and your friends and family to get involved, to sit down and record a few sentences. I know you've got a program designed and, scripts, if you will, for people to follow. And we will certainly add links in our show notes for people to explore the opportunity. But before we let you go, Bob, one thing I am really interested in, I heard you talk about where Project Euphonia started, the history of Project Euphonia recently. Could you tell us? I think if I remember correctly, the original idea wasn't necessarily just to improve speech or
That's right.
machine learning for speech. Could you tell us what the original idea was?
Yeah, so it kind of ties in a little bit to the types of projects I was working on before joining Euphonia full time. Even though I wasn't involved in that kind of foundational stage, uh, there were some incredibly insightful people working with neurologists and bringing some state-of-the-art machine learning ideas to the table around whether it's possible to build a machine learning based system as a diagnostic tool for people with neurodegenerative diseases like ALS. So there was a collaboration started with an organization called ALS TDI that's working on solving ALS at the root cause, like what's happening at the molecular level, at the genetic level, that interferes with our kind of neuromusculature. And one thing that they would really love to have is a more objective and more accurate tool to basically measure the progression of someone's disease. If you're developing a cure, and it's not like an on-off switch, like boom, you take a pill and no one expects that that's going to be the case. But if you can slow down the progression or pause it, that would be profoundly beneficial to a lot of people. And so what they wanted to know is, could we train computers to do a better job at kind of accurately, objectively, consistently tracking someone's progression just from the sound of their voice? And so that was the start of it. We started, looking at voice samples from a population of patients that they've been working with through the years. And through the course of that, realized, hey, we're hearing these speech patterns, and our voice recognizers do a very poor job of accurately translating what they're saying, and that's really disappointing. We could do something that would help these people much sooner, because a cure for ALS, these are super complicated diseases. It's going to take many years. We think while this is research, we have the potential to impact people sooner. And so then the program totally pivoted, and we said, look, we can continue collecting this data and having this long-term kind of diagnostic approach. But in the meantime, let's see if we can help from an accessibility standpoint and from a quality of life, because there's an awful lot of people, and even people without a degenerative condition, that deserve something better. Again, it was sort of this circuitous route, but I'm really happy with where we are now.
Hearing you say that reminds me of the words Alex Trebek recently spoke, and he's I want to say close to 80 or maybe in his 70s, and we all know he's battling cancer. And recently, in an interview, he said, I'm about to start another round of chemo. And I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm about to start another round of chemo, and this will be the last one, because there comes a point in life where we have to decide quality of life over the long-term effects of a treatment like chemo. It's very devastating and hard on the body. And I love that you talk about that, because really they're both very, very important to our mental and emotional state every day. If we're not enjoying the quality of life today, that takes the fight out of us when it comes to the other important things like going through chemo. And so I love that you mentioned that, and I love that both are important and on your radar, because they really are both incredibly valuable to a successful life. The quality of life that I experience today versus whatever cures and treatments might come tomorrow, both are very important to me. And I love that seems to be an understanding that you and probably so many of your colleagues share.
Yeah, and and the other thing I'll say is, we really do live in. It's a remarkable sort of blessing to be in a fertile environment to do something like this. Google allows individuals who are passionate about solving important problems a quite wide degree of latitude to pursue them. And even though this wasn't inspired by a business model, and Google is a business, we're able to focus on things that are just the right thing to do over kind of nearer term and longer term. So really, it's the mindset that's possible from a company like Google, and there are other big companies, that also foster research in areas like this, combined with the technology, combined with the kind of social media and the connectedness that groups like yours provide, that I think really makes this a quite special time when all of these forces can align, and hopefully we can do something really positive fairly quickly.
Well, I get chills and goosebumps when I hear things put in that perspective. When you like any business, right? Google exists to make money. But in the process, they're realizing they have the ability to impact the world around them, even when it doesn't turn a profit. And I love that places like that and companies like Google and many others allow people like you the freedom to explore and to dig into your work for the sake of others. So I'm really thankful that you shared it and put it that way. And I'm so incredibly grateful for me personally and for Kyle and so many of our listeners that you, Bob, have the freedom to do this, that you're working on this particular project. And of course, I'm grateful that Google allows you to do that. And I'm grateful that you joined us today to share just a glimpse. I imagine that we could probably talk for hours.
Yeah, we definitely could. We just scratched the surface, and hopefully we can have a part 2 down the road.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll need to check in on the progress of the project. So for sure.
Yeah, no, it's really been my pleasure to have the chance to spend time with you guys today. Giving you a bit of visibility of what goes on behind the scenes, what's motivating the individuals involved, how we hope to help. What I would hope down the road is we can talk even more about the ways that we're trying to connect the underlying technology to things that do improve quality of life. Because it can affect. We think we can help people with person-to-person communication, or with video calls that might have a live transcription, like a text screen going at the same time, or to devices to activate home automation or just answer basic queries, or for non-live communications of writing letters and texts, or one of the people that we were working with earlier on in the program was just an avid, short story writer. And as he lost the ability to type, because his hands were affected, that's another agonizing aspect of ALS. It's both your speech and your typing. So it really, so we want to hopefully make the connections between the technology and kind of humans and the quality of life benefits that could be derived from it. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you again, Bob. Thank you, Google and team.
Thank you, Kyle and Sean. It's really a pleasure, and hopefully your listeners found something useful, and we look to hear from many of them in the coming weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. Bob seems like such a smart guy, but also down to earth. Like, I want to be his friend. If we lived in the same city, I feel like I would beg him to be friends with me.
Yeah, and then he'd be like, sorry, man, got stuff to do.
Probably. I'm too busy for you. That's right. I'm sure he's not super nice guy, and we are honored that he agreed to get on the phone with us. One thing that makes this episode and today, the day it comes out, really cool is that it is World Cure Duchenne Day, or World Duchenne Day, and the voice you heard at the beginning of this episode, Håkan Miller, lives with Duchenne, and we interviewed him in episode 109, and part of the reason why we got together with Project Euphonia and these things all are falling into place is Cure Duchenne. So we're excited to be able to release this episode on World Duchenne Day. We also want to begin to wrap things up. So as you all know, it's time to get into our one things. And this week, Kyle and I are going to do a collective one thing. We both have some work to do with our own recordings for Project Euphonia. It's time to take it to the next level for us. So, Kyle is going to record 500 new samples, and I'm going to record 501 new samples this week.
What? Wait a minute.
I'm just saying, I'm going to do better than you. Not really. We'll both do 500, so 1,000 new samples for Google.
As always, we want to end our episode with a little gratitude, and today's thank you note goes to Team Gleason and Cure Duchenne for allowing us to be part of their effort to provide samples and spread the word about Project Euphonia and improve the lives of people with dysarthria. And it's something really great that we're really proud to be a part of. So check out our show notes, get involved, record your samples, contribute to the project, and until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.